welcoming. This is our third workshop in the building websites with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript series. All right. So just to kickstart our workshop today, I'll do a very brief introduction of myself again for those who missed out our previous workshops. My name is Eric, and I'm the assigned instructor for this series of workshops, namely building websites with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, deploying web applications, and programming with databases on AWS. So just to do a little bit of housekeeping, I will need you to download a couple of applications, all right? Two applications specifically, which I'll share in the Zoom chat now. So there's one is Node.js, and then another one is Insomnia REST download. All right, Node.js is an application that lives in your terminal, while Insomnia is another application that you actually have a window that you can use. Like let's say, if I can start sharing screen now, yeah. So as you can see over here, just like our VS Code, we have an actual window that you can interact with and all that. That is the type of application Insomnia is, but Node.js doesn't have a window like this, right? So I recommend you guys to get started on installing it because Node.js is quite a huge download. So I recommend you guys start downloading it now and let it run in the background. Okay, so we have a lot to cover today, including a little bit that I missed out last workshop, which is yesterday, because we don't have enough time. So let's get started on it. So just to get our admin over here, our development workflow right, I'm going to start my VS Code application again. So I hope you guys still remember how to start your application, how to start your development workflow. Okay, sorry, I forgot to mention Node.js. Please download the latest LTS version. Let me just look for it over here. Please download over here, the one on the left. Recommended for most users. This one is the most stable version, right? Okay. All right, so you start your VS Code, and then there are multiple ways to open up your web project. For example, in our last workshops, we've been doing this project where we were built on the folder built on ASEAN 2021. So I'm just going to build on the same folder. So I'm going to stick with that. Either I can click on this link over here. If you see this on your start screen, if you don't see it, you can always click on the file button over here on the top left corner on the navigation bar and look for your folder. So I'm going to go through the long way, obviously, so that everyone can follow. I'm going to click on open over here and just navigate to the folder. So mine is located in the code folder, and then just look for Build on ASEAN 2021 folder. So clicking on open will load your project, and this is where you want to be. Now I'm going to do a little bit of like cleanup because this is what we did last workshop, and we were sort of like showing you all the DOM APIs, all the APIs that you can do to manipulate your HTML and all that. So to cover the next section, which is basically forms, I would just want to clean everything up so that you guys are not confused, because we're going to write quite a bit of JavaScript, quite a bit of HTML. So I'm just going to clean everything up first. So let's just start with index.html. I'm going to clean all these things. Inside body, I want to clean everything away, right? So inside body, there should be a single line that links your JavaScript, okay, script.js, and then everything else should just remain the same. Everything else is there and it's fine. Now, if we go back to our script.js, now I want you to clean everything up inside this function. You see this bracket over here, this curly bracket? The contents of this curly bracket basically means that it belongs to the function that is assigned to window.onload, okay? I want to keep the function, but I don't want anything else inside it, right? So I'm going to delete everything. And this is the clean slate that you should start with, okay? So last week, we basically stopped at forms, right? Stopped at HTML DOM APIs, but we forgot to sort of like cover, or we didn't have enough time to cover how do you access and retrieve data from your forms, right? From JavaScript. How do you make arrow sign equal and larger than this? It only shows up as arrow on my screen, okay? So we are supposed to do how do you use JavaScript to access your form, right? Possible to share your code to follow along. Yeah, I'll try to upload it to GitHub, and then maybe I'll share the link. Maybe then you guys can access from that point. Okay. So let me look at our HTML over here. So for example, I have a situation over here, and I have a couple of form, and I want to retrieve some sort of like input from the user, right? So it's very common for you. The workflow is usually you come in here and then you create your form. If you still remember your HTML, right? So I also mentioned action is this attribute over here is a legacy behavior, right? I don't recommend using it anymore, especially when you're starting out. So we just leave it as a very bland form over here. And then what I want to do is probably attach an ID to it. And then over here, I'll probably say registration form. Okay. So why is this useful? So that I'm able to link it using maybe my CSS or even my JavaScript. I'm able to directly recognize which form am I trying to refer to. So, and then after that, the next step is you adding your inputs, your labels, and then grouping them up together. So just a very quick example. Let me just do this. So this is one option. Okay, this is one option. Let me just single this out so that you guys can see. So there's label and there's input, label, and input. Your input basically labeled as type text, which is the most basic type of input, which is just a single line. And you put ID name. What is ID name for? So that your label can link it with this four attribute over here, so that they know they exist. And then when you click on label, your input with the same ID will come into focus. Spaces matter in HTML, CSS, or JavaScript? No, does not. You can put everything on the same line, but obviously it will be very hard to read. Okay. And then name over here, I also mentioned back in our first HTML workshop. If you put name is equals to something, this is what is this going to be recognized in JavaScript. Okay, so it's very important for you to label this correctly. Usually, you label this with the same name as your ID, and the name, right? So that's why they all have the same strings over here. So I group them up using a div, right? So that I basically have a structure where I say, hey, this is one input, and then I move on to the next. Okay. So div is your most generic container. It doesn't mean anything, but it's just a container that allows you to group things up together. And then after that, I'm just going to create a couple more. So let's say, what is this form about? Let's say this is like a HR form. Whenever you hire someone or something like that, and then you pass this form and you ask, hey, fill in your details. I want to know what's your name, what's your age, and all that, right? So let me just put a couple of like sample fields over here. So for example, I have age. Same thing, nothing has changed except I basically changed the for, ID, and name to age, right? So nothing has changed. It is still text, okay? And then after that, I probably want to continue to add on the rest of the things. Okay, don't be alarmed. There are just a couple more inputs. Let me single them out for me to explain. All right, so we have name, and then after that we have our age, and then we have your unit number, where do you stay, and then your building name, what's your building name, and then I'm asking for your favorite food as well, 1, 2, and 3, basically like how do you rank the most favorite food, something like that. Okay, so for now, this form is kind of ready, right? We have a couple of fields, right, all ready to get some text. As you can see, every single input is just type text, okay? So type text is very, very common. Only for special situations, you probably want to like explore other types, okay? And then one last thing that we usually want to do is maybe add a submit button. So I mentioned also, if you guys know HTML before, you probably are inclined to use button, right? And then, or maybe input type submit or something like that. But those, they have their own behavior. So I don't really recommend you using those. So please just create a very simple div and then maybe write a submit form inside here so that you can visually see that this is a button. It is not technically a button, but you can use JavaScript to turn this into a button. So I'll also add an ID over here. Maybe I'll say this is a submit form button, something like that. Okay. Why is this important? Because also we need to use JavaScript to add our behavior to this button. So that's why we need to be able to write a CSS selector to select this particular div. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to save this thing. I'm going to start my whole web preview and all that, the live server, all those things. On the bottom right corner, I'm going to click on the Go Live button. So for those who missed out, this is an extension called Live Server. This extension over here, if you install this thing, you should have a button on the bottom right corner that says Go Live. I'm going to click on that button. And this is your form, all right? We zoom in. So for now, it doesn't do anything, obviously, right? Because there's no behavior. I haven't code up a behavior where I can type my name and everything, submit form, and it goes to anywhere. It doesn't do anything yet. It's a simple form that doesn't do anything when you click on submit form or anything. It's just visually a form, all right? So let's look at how we're going to add this behavior so that when you click on submit form and then you can do stuff with it, all right? So on your JavaScript, it's very common for you to first need to know what is this form, right? How do you select this form? The first step that you need to do is to be able to select the form. So usually when you're dealing with forms, right, when there's a submit button and everything, you kind of have to understand that this is out of your normal, usual programming paradigm. Because when let's say you're coding up in Python, you usually have like line 1 to 10, and then you execute from line 1 to 10. But in JavaScript, it's very sort of like depending on what we call events, right? Waiting for things to happen. What if the user decides to click the submit button later? What if the user decides to click on the submit button, maybe after he fills in 2 forms, 2 fields or whatever? So you need to code up in such a way that you are waiting for something to happen, right? And in order for you to do that, you need to be able to first select the button first. Let's do the button first. So I will select the button. Button is equals to document.query selector. Still remember, query selector. And I'm going to pass in the CSS selector for this button, all right? So if you kind of forgot how to write the CSS selector for this button, all you need to do is go back to your HTML. This button has div, ID, submit form button. Okay, that's all I need. I'm gonna write div hash submit dash form dash button. Okay, so this should get me the button itself. Now I'm going to move on and try to see what is this. Is this a button, the correct button that I've selected? I'm just going to console.log. So saving this thing, opening up my developer tools. If you're on Mac, Command Option I. If you're on what's it called? Windows, I think it's F12. Okay. So either way, I think on Windows you can press Control Option I as well. Control Option, yeah. Control Shift I? Yes, I think it's Control Shift I. Sorry. Okay, so this is the developer tool that you need to bring up. I'm going to pick it up. All right. So if you can see your console.log, this is the form that you want to. This is the button that you want to select. So if you hover on top of it and then you see it being highlighted on your screen, that means you did it correct. Okay, you managed to select the form, the button correctly. Okay, so now let's code up the next part, which is us basically writing how do you listen to events. All right. So once you have a button, the way to code up the web heavily relies on the fact that you need to listen to a certain event. So to do that, you have to use button.add_event_listener. Add event listener. So add event listener is a function that allows you to basically let you define a function to run when a certain event happens. Okay. So the way this works is that you basically write a string, the first argument to this function. You write the event that you want to listen to. So for example, the most common event that we're dealing with over here is click, and that's very, very common. Usually sometimes if very rare cases, you might want to do like when you hover on top of this thing, when you mouse out, mouse in, and then your mouse is at certain XY location, all that, but it's pretty advanced from that point. I think you should be good enough 90% of the way with the click event, right? Because usually you want interaction when you click on something, okay? So the click event basically gets triggered, and then the second argument is where you need to pass in, hey, what am I supposed to do, right? And in order for you to define a list of like actions for you to do, the best way to do it is to pass in a function. To do that, remember when we define a function, you just put double parentheses, equal sign and larger than, and a curly bracket. This is a function itself, right? And this is not, this is quite unique to JavaScript because you can pass in functions as arguments to another function, right? It is as if it's like a real data structure. It's like you're dealing with arrays, objects, and all that, strings, numbers. So it's real, okay? So this is very interesting because this allows you to do something like, hey, when you click on this button, please console.log hello from button, let's say. Okay, so I'm going to save this thing. As you can see, my developer tools hasn't got any console.log. I don't see anything yet, right? But let me go and click on the submit form, this so-called button. If I click on it, you see how now there's a console.log, right? So essentially, I basically turn it into a button by using add event listener. I don't have to specifically go and use the button HTML in order to have this behavior. So that's why I recommended you guys to just create a div, use JavaScript to add event listener because it is that simple. Okay. Now, the next thing that we need to do is obviously, hey, when I fill in my form, I want to do submit form. I basically need to grab all this data. So what do you usually have to do? When you click on the submit button, usually you will want to now read the contents of the form. Okay, I want to read now because now this guy wants to submit. I want to read your form. So usually what you have to do is now you select your form, constant, let's say form. Okay, don't worry about the variable name. You can label it anything you want. Doesn't have to be form. I'm going to select the form HTML element, document.query selector. So what's the form HTML CSS selector over here? Let me go to my HTML. So it was form with an ID registration form. Okay, so that's pretty easy to write. It has the same format as our div over here. I'm going to write form hash, what's it called? Registration dash form. I think that's it, right? HTML. Registration dash form. Okay, correct. Okay. So again, please at every single step, make sure whenever you try to select stuff, right, it doesn't hurt for you to check if this is the item that you want, you're dealing with the correct item, okay, the correct element. So I'm going to click on this element. As you can see, I have a form and I have a hover on top of it. You can see a whole form being highlighted. And that's correct. That is exactly what we want, okay? So we're going to move on. Now, once you have the form selected, right? Remember last time when I asked you guys to, hey, when you write your form, please wrap it in the form tag and all that, because it provides a lot of convenient tools for you to work with forms like this. Okay, you don't have to go and manually select one by one. Once you have the form selected, the form object that comes back will basically contain all these inputs for you, all this name, age, input, unit number, building name, and all that, right? So let's look at how do you work with those. Over here, form.elements contains all of your inputs over here, all right? All this name, age, unit number, building name, all right? So for example, let me just try to check console.log. What is form.elements? What is form.elements? As you can see, there's nothing yet, obviously, because I haven't clicked on form. Click on the submit form. Once I click on it, it shows up like this, all right? Even though it says HTML form controls collection and all that, but it works almost the same as an array, which I'll show you what you can do with this. So form.elements, let's say I want to save this into constant inputs is equals to form.elements. Okay, save this. Now I have just inputs, yeah. I don't have to worry about writing the whole form.elements again and again. So you should have the same behavior, nothing has changed. I just introduced a new variable. So there are a couple of ways for you to access the values inside this form. So let's say if I were to do inputs square bracket 0. You see how when I save this thing, right? When I click on submit form, I get the first input. You see when I hover on top of it, I get the first input using index, just the indexing number, right? All right, just like how you basically retrieve individual values from an array. So if I say I change this to 4, I should be able to get the 5th item, right? So if I click on submit form again, hover on top of this thing, you see how I can get the 5th item, all right? So this is one way of doing it, or you can use the name, all right? This is where the how diligent you are in your HTML shows up in your JavaScript. Because when you write your HTML over here, remember this name over here on your input, name age, name unit number, name building name. That shows up in your JavaScript. How? Inputs dot name refers to any input that has the name over here. You see here? Okay. And if I change this to age, save, change, click on submit form, I get age, right? So I don't have to sort of like, come in here and, oops, what happened to my HTML? HTML, oh yeah, what is this going on? Label, input. Okay, something wrong. Something went wrong just now. Age, okay, this should be fine. Div, inputs, okay, this should be fine. On your JavaScript, okay, so this basically just shows you how you retrieve individual values. So for example, favorite food 1, I can do inputs.favorite food 1. Okay, and then when you save this thing, you click on the button, and then it shows up the favorite food 1 input that you want. Okay, so this is how you basically are given ways for you to access individual inputs. You don't have to select one by one. When you select the form automatically gives you all these inputs automatically pre-appended onto form.elements. Remember, it's form.elements. Right? As you can see over here, the structure of my HTML doesn't matter. I don't need to care about whether there's a div wrapping around it or maybe how heavy your HTML is. There's like a CSS going on here, show this H1, H2. It doesn't care about all these things. So long your inputs are inside your form, they are basically arranged in the order how they appear in your HTML document. So with that, over here, usually, this is how you access. Usually when you are dealing with forms, right, you will want to create a single object and then you put maybe your name and then you write your details and all that. Okay, so that's pretty common. So usually I will try to, let's say, final payload. This is ready to be sent to maybe a server or something like that, which we'll do later. So the way to do this is create an object and you craft your object according to the form, right? So for example, I'm going to write my name, and then this one will be inputs dot name dot value. Dot value will refer to the actual value that you put inside here, okay? And then you just do this for the rest of the inputs. Age, inputs dot age dot value, and then address. Now the thing about unit number and building name, you can skip them separate, but let me just go one more level and group them up using address. You can also do this. I can say unit number, inputs dot unit number dot value, right? And then building name, inputs.building_name.value. And then we have your favorite food, 1, 2, and 3. So how do we store favorite food, 1, 2, and 3? So I think using an array will be best. So I'll probably write favorite food, and then use an array of unit number, inputs dot favorite food 1 dot value. And then I'll basically do this 3 times, and then change the number to 2, change the number to 3. So I have 1, 2, 3 like this, okay? So the final end goal, let me just console the log what is final payload, all right, and save this. So technically, after I fill in the form, when I click on submit form, I should be able to see what is this final structure, this whole object over here, which is what I need, all right? In the end, when I communicate with servers, this is what I need to send to the server, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'll probably write a couple of details over here, maybe B47, building name of the East, the mark, okay, chicken rice, and maybe burger, all right? So when I click on submit form, let's see what's inside here. All right, so on your developer tools, this is where it appeared. You can see there's address, all the structure correct, age 31, favorite food, blah, 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 name, everything, okay? So everything looks fine except probably age. Age, I probably want to do one more step where I convert this into a number. So to convert this into a number, I think you can use this. What is it? Number. Yeah. Let's try this again. So Eric, 31. One, 2, 3. Okay. Click on submit form. All right. So this your number is now an actual number rather than a string just now. Okay. So if you remember input from Python, when you input something, even though you type numbers into it, they'll come back as strings forever. Okay. So you have to go through one more step to change it into a number if you want to, right? And all that. Okay. So everything looks pretty good over here. And this is ready for you to send to a server, which we'll talk in a bit later, right? So we'll leave this for now, and I'm going to move on to talk about the next section, which is deploying this website onto your onto S3. Okay. So from our last 2 workshops, including today's workshop, we already have a website code that you can develop, view, and interact with locally, which is what we're doing over here. But obviously, a website that you can interact with locally isn't the best because you want to share it with everyone, and what better way to share it with everyone if, other than putting it onto the cloud. So the idea of deploying your website to the cloud is basically you putting all of your website code at a certain cloud service online and let the service handle all the hosting work for you. So to do that, I would need you guys to navigate to your AWS Educate account. So if you don't have that ready, don't worry. This lecture workshop is pre-recorded, so you can always come back to this thing and then basically view and follow the steps as we go along. So what we can do is I'm going to go to my AWS Educate over here. You can always go to this website using awseducate.com. All right, as mentioned, please don't sign up using these few buttons here. Make sure you sign up using the what's it called, the link that Valerie has sent through email. What if we get DDoS attack? AWS has their own preventive measures. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. So that's the cool part about like deploying to AWS. They basically handle all these problems for you. All you need to worry about as a developer, I have code, I want to deploy. That's all. Okay. So I'm just going to go straight into logging into my AWS Educate account. Login. So depending on your AWS Educate account, you are basically invited into classrooms. Okay. So what you should do is maybe you should click on My Classrooms. There should be a list of classrooms that basically appeared on your screen. So I have a couple of classrooms going on here. What I do is I probably just pick one, the one that I haven't been working with at all. So I'm just going to click on this. So you'll be redirected to a site, a Vocarium site. Okay, so this site over here is what handles the part where they allow you to access your AWS accounts. Okay, so this is what you should be looking at. If you see this screen, right, that means you're doing it right. It's just one more step before actually accessing your AWS account. So for now, we are only going to deal with this button over here, not this one yet, but tomorrow we'll be touching this. Okay, so for now, let's just click on this AWS console button. If you're on Safari, they block your pop-ups, so make sure you enable that. All right, so for you guys who already have an AWS Educate account, or you also have a HTML code ready somewhere, okay? So please also try out all the steps over here. If not, you can always rewatch the recording. So this is your console. I mentioned before, back in our first workshop, how do you navigate across your AWS management console? So I'm not going to go through that again. So for our purposes today, we want to deploy a website, okay? A website that doesn't have a server, right? So technically it's just like a very bare static website. So in this kind of situations, the best service that you can use to deploy a website is actually S3 here, okay? So S3 basically stands for Amazon Simple Storage Service, AWS S3, Simple Storage Service. That's why it's called S3, there are three S's, okay? So S3 is very much like your Dropbox, your Google Drive, and all. It's basically like storage on the internet, except they have their own structure. Okay. So you can choose to store gigabytes and terabytes of files over here and get charged for pennies, right? Unlike Dropbox and Google Drive, which charges straight up like $5 for 50 gigabyte in tiers, right? So in S3, you only get charged if you access the files, download the files, stream the files, or anything, or they also charge you when you store your files, but it's very, very cheap, okay? So technically, if you're uploading files to serve as a backup or deleting or just deleting files, okay, when you're using S3 as a backup, it's very cheap for you to maintain, right? Just gigabytes and terabytes of files, okay? So you don't get charged as much as other storage providers. So, and not just that, not just like, uploading files and all that, S3 is also useful for hosting static websites, which is exactly what we need to do over here. So I want you guys to, if you're following, let me just look for S3. Okay, click on S3 service. This is what you should be looking at, okay? So I forgot to mention this, on your Vocarium over here, right? You see this session time? So you're basically provided with 3 hours per session time. What this is for is basically like a safe measure so that you don't, if you messed up your work or whatever, if you leaked out your credentials, people manage to log into your AWS console, they manage to steal your credentials and access them programmatically. There's a limit of 3 hours for that. Okay, so it's sort of like another safety measure, so that because you're not used to dealing with cloud accounts. Okay, so they're trying to make sure that nothing happens. So in the event that this thing runs out, all you need to do is probably refresh, or you can do the whole process over here. Come in here again, click on Go to Classroom. Okay, it should work just the same. So once you're on S3 Management Console, you should be able to see this screen, okay? And this screen over here, if you just click on buckets over here, buckets. So this is basically what they refer to for their sort of like top level folders. They call them buckets, okay? So usually for different purposes, different projects, we have to create different buckets. So for example, over here, we have one single website, and that deserves a bucket of its own, okay? So what I want you guys to do is I'm going to click on the orange button that says create bucket over here. This one works too, no worries. So I'm going to click on that, and they are required to basically complete this form. So this form basically requires you to name your bucket, but this is very interesting because the bucket name must be unique, right? It must be unique across, if I'm not wrong, across a certain region, okay? So in this case, US East 1, your bucket name must be unique across the whole region of US East 1. And usually, I mean, sometimes you just don't have the vocab for enough words to describe this bucket to be unique enough. Somehow, sometimes just someone will be able to, like, write a bucket name that's same to yours. Yes, yeah, Jeremy, your mic was unmuted. Okay, so idea here is that you must generate a unique enough bucket name, right? So the way to do this is quite easy. Sometimes you just don't have to, like, just keep typing names and all that. I will highly recommend you to go to this website. UUID generator, this one over here. So this basically is like an online website that generates a certain string for you, and it is unique enough. Usually it's unique enough. All right. So you can copy this string over here, and then you come in here and paste it, and then you proceed with naming your bucket. Okay. It's a little bit cryptic, but don't worry about this. You can start with this or you can end with this, doesn't matter. Maybe I'll say like build on ASEAN 2021 website dash, right? So it's pretty long, but it's unique enough. It's definitely unique enough. Okay. So over here, AWS region, make sure you maintain this selection. If it's not selected over here, make sure you select US East 1 because AWS Educate only provisions your resources on this region over here. So don't need to click on any of the settings. Make sure you uncheck this thing because this one blocks public access. And usually, I mean, if you're serving it as a website, you want everyone to be able to see this. Okay, so you uncheck this thing, and there will be an extra clause over here telling you that please acknowledge this because turning off block all public access will basically create a situation where all your contents, all your objects inside this bucket will be public, right? Everyone can see. So it's just another safety feature. But of course, we're building a website. I want everyone to see. So unless public access is required for specific and verified use cases, such as static website hosting, which is exactly what we need, okay? So just acknowledge this. This is just an acknowledgement form. And then I leave everything else the same. Yeah, nothing else that you should change. So again, add your name, make sure it's unique, right? If it's not unique enough, they come back and say not unique enough, so you need to find a way to make it unique. The easiest way is just to generate an ID from some UID generator over here. If you have another way to generate ID, feel free, okay? And then we have, make sure you stick with this region, US East 1, uncheck block all public access and acknowledge the form over here. And at the end of the form, please click on create bucket. Oh, it's too long. Okay, it's too long. So create bucket. Okay. So there's a chance of the form being too long anyway. All right. So now you have your bucket listed on the list of buckets over here, right? So if I click on this thing, this is like your Dropbox, Google Drive, right? You should be able to recognize this is how you basically deal with anything that is inside this bucket. So the way to upload this website is pretty simple. All you need to do is come back to your web application over here. I will have to right-click on this Explorer. Okay, right-click on this Explorer and find an option that says Reveal in Finder. Now this is on Mac. If you're on Windows, it will show up as like Open with File Explorer, Show in File Explorer, something like that. Okay, because the idea here is I need to be able to navigate through the folder. Okay, I need to navigate into the folder. So now the next step is go into the folder and highlight everything. You want to upload everything. Don't upload the folder itself. I want to upload the contents of the folder. So now the next step is I'm going to highlight everything and just drag and drop onto your screen. And then they'll ask you all this, basically it's like a confirmation page, right? And after that, you just need to click on upload, and then they'll proceed to upload your files. One last one, okay, done. All right, so I can click on close over here, and we are back on the bucket screen, okay? So you should be able to see all your files that you have uploaded. So now there are a couple of settings that we need to turn on, because usually buckets, they're used for storage, right? In special situations where people use it for website, you have to kind of go and toggle some of the settings. Now, the first setting that you need to do is obviously come down here to permissions. Permissions, right now your bucket is not public. No one can see these contents of this thing. And also it's not configured to host websites yet. So what happens here is that first we need to change what we call the bucket policy. So bucket policy allows us to say, hey, this bucket, please show all the contents of this bucket to everyone, okay? So we need to basically write something on this thing. So the way to do this is over here. I'm going to ask you guys to copy whatever I'm trying to do. Okay, now so I have this chunk over here, which I'm going to share this to everyone. Okay, so this link, this gist over here contains the bucket policy. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is just copy this whole chunk. Okay, copy this whole chunk and here. Okay, and paste it inside here. All right. So please don't change any of the values. You only have to change this particular section over here. So this basically says bucket IARN goes here. Okay, so please replace this whole chunk with whatever that you have over here. It even allows you to copy this directly. So please click on the copy button and just replace this chunk with the bucket ARN. Make sure you retain the slash and the exclamation mark, not exclamation mark, asterisk over here, because this is what defines and says all of the resources inside this folder. Okay, so make sure you have that. So once you have that, I think nothing else that you need to change. Please don't change the date over here. Yeah, you're not supposed to like write today's date, 2021 June 16 or something like that. Please don't change this date, right? After that, I'm going to click on Save Changes. Okay, so that's one. Okay, that's one level of permissions. We're done turning off this block public access, and we're done configuring the bucket policy. Okay, and after that, there's one last thing that you need to turn on is the actual setting for you to turn this bucket into a static website hosting bucket. So I want you guys to click on properties on your tab, on this list of tabs over here, navigation bar. Click on this. If you scroll down to the bottom, you should be able to see there's an option that says a clause, right? A section that says static website hosting. So it's just like a switch that you need to turn on. So if I click on the edit button, all right, so you just need to enable instead of disable. And then every other option should remain the same. Okay, now this is where you specify the default page of the website. You see how they recommend you to put index.html. So please make sure you put index.html as well, because that is our whole page. And then for error pages, error documents, usually if they visit a website and then they try to access a path that doesn't exist, you sort of like have to tell them, hey, you're lost, and all that. Just like our website, I think we have that as well. Let's say / la la la. Yeah, this is how it looks like for at least for our website. It looks like you're lost, right, and all that. Okay, so if you have something like that happening, maybe you want to put in your HTML. But if you don't have that, I think it's fine if you just put index.html. Okay, and after that, you click on Save Changes. Okay, and that's it. All right. So technically, that's all the settings that you need to do. Turn on your permissions. change your bucket policy, and then properties, make sure you toggle the setting to enable static website hosting. All right. So, and then after you have enabled static website hosting, you will notice there's a new link that appears over here. Okay. So if you click on this link, bucket policy option, you can go on permissions, go down, there should be a bucket policy. Okay. Click on edit here. Okay. So properties, you're going to look at the bottom option, the bottom section, static website hosting, and you click on this link over here. You can copy, share with your friends or whatever, but when I click on this thing, you will open a new tab and you should be able to see your website. Okay, this was what we coded just now, right? I can see all this things. Okay, you should even have the same behavior if I open developer tools. I can zoom in. Oops. H, maybe I write 31 here. Submit. Yeah, see how it shows up here as well. Okay, so the way this works is that they basically fetch your HTML first, then your HTML says, I need CSS, I need JavaScript, then the two files comes in. Okay, so that's why you can see your script running here. Okay, and that's basically your website hosted. I can even share this link to you guys and you should be able to access this as well. Okay, close, doing this. All right, so that's your website hosting. So now the next part is I'm going to talk about how do you build your backend applications, right? Now that we're done with like deploying the website, I'm going to revisit some of the role concepts that we talked about very briefly in the beginning of the course, workshop, all right, workshop series. As well, you guys might be aware of by now, apps are actually made of like multi-layered components, okay? But generally, we can deconstruct all these apps into three following components. One is front end. What is front end is basically what we'll be doing up until now. We have your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That is one type of front end. Another type of front end, you have like your apps on your Mac, on your MacBook, and then you have your Windows apps, .exe, and then you have your iPhone apps, your Android apps, and all that. Those are called front end apps. Okay. And then you have your backend. Okay, backend is actually a very large, very broad term, which consists of both servers and storage, persistent storage. Okay, persistent storage is just a nicer way of saying databases. Servers is what we are going to explore now. Okay. So what is the server? Server is basically an application, a running application that's basically sitting on at the cloud, right? That's waiting for you to send that request. Okay, when they receive requests, right, they'll come back and reply to you that, oh, I received a request, and then what are you requesting? You're requesting for the list of your students in the class. Okay, I'll come back and give it to you. All right. So what is this server for? Server controls all logic and any sort of permissioning before you let them access or modify data on your databases, right? So your server is supposed to be that layer, that gateway to your databases. You don't let any other front end to access your database directly, because why? We want to be able to sort of like control, are you who you are you authenticated or not? I'm containing like very sensitive customer information. Are you the one authorized to view all this data? Because if you don't have these things, you're gonna get into a trouble, because people will say like, hey, I share you all this customer information. How come you're letting everyone see this information? Okay, so that's what a server is usually for. Now I know there's some situations where they let you control, like let's say Firebase, let's say they can access your database directly and all that. But even that also, there's another layer at the front, something like a server that controls whether you are who you are or not. Are you permitted to see whatever data that's inside here? Okay. So servers can be written in many languages, such as Python, JavaScript, Java, Ruby. But for the sake of not adding another hurdle of handling different languages for you guys, we're going to use JavaScript again, okay, to code up our servers. So technically, after you learn JavaScript, you can code both front end and the back end using a single programming language, okay? So To do this, I will need you guys to download Node.js, okay, which is what I talked about over here, Node.js, and also the application called Insomnia. So it says here download Insomnia for Mac OS, but for you guys, if you're on Windows, this should show up as Windows, depending on the platform. So please download your application here, okay? So Node.js, what is Node.js for? So to explain what is this thing, right? To code up servers in JavaScript, you need to first understand that there are two different runtimes, okay, that we need to understand here, right? So one is when you're looking at your web, right, your web browser and all that, that is one runtime, which is your web JavaScript engine, okay, which whatever you've been using all the while, okay? So that's fine and everything, but when you code up servers, you cannot use your web browser anymore. You need to use another runtime, and that is what we call, usually we use what we call Node, okay, Node.js over here. So it's basically like a separate engine, okay, that you can use to run JavaScript and obviously create servers, okay. Which one comes first? The browser comes first, and then only they feel like, I've learned JavaScript, why don't I use JavaScript to write servers? Therefore, Node comes along as well, okay. So now we're going to create our backend application. Now to create a backend application, we are going to ditch the old folder. This folder is only for web, for our front-end website. We're not going to use this anymore. So I'm just going to close this thing. Maybe not close, I'll leave it here. So I'm going to create a new folder. Okay, I'm going to create a new folder. So to create a new folder, all I need to do is, on your different platform, I don't know which shortcut you're going to use on Windows. On Mac, it's Command-Shift-N, okay? I think on Windows, it's Control-Shift-N, something like that, okay? So we're going to create a folder just for this, what's it called, backend application. So what we can do here is I'll probably say this application is for HR app, something like that, right? I'll call this HR app maybe. So let's say we're building a HR app. This HR app is supposed to create what's called our users, our employees that are hired. We give them a form, and then when they submit the form, I can use this to basically write to databases and all that. Obviously, we're not going to write databases today, but we need to learn how to write our servers. So once we have our folder already, we can move on to click on File. I'll probably close this one first. Yeah, let's close folder and File, open, and navigate to the HR app folder. Okay, depending on what you name your folder, doesn't have to be HR app. So I'll stick with HR app. Right. So we're starting a completely new project. This project will be completely separate from your web API front-end application over here, which was, what's it called? Build on ASEAN 2021. Okay, so this new folder, HR app. So the first thing that we need to do over here is proceed to create a file called app.js. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, again, check for whether you have HR app over here, and then click on the new file. I'm going to create a file called app.js. What did I type? App.js. Okay, all right. So it's very similar to our scripts.js. It's the JS extension over here basically indicates that this is a JavaScript file, right? They obviously both run on JavaScript. There are many ways to name this file. You can name this a server.js, main.js, index.js, start.js, whatever names you want. But for us to have all this configuration to work right out of the box when we deploy it to AWS, please try to stick with app.js. This should be your starting point, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write a very simple console.log over here. You guys should still feel familiar with console.log. After all, this is still JavaScript. I'm going to write hello world, okay? And save this file. Now, how do you run this file once you have this app.js? To run this file, instead of opening up a browser and you load your HTML file like a front-end application, we're going to use the application that we downloaded just now called Node.js. Okay, we're going to use this to run our files. But this application doesn't appear like how you have the VS Code, there's a window and everything. It doesn't work like that. Instead, it lives in what you call the terminal, okay? So for you guys, if you're on your own platform after you have installed your terminal, after you install your Node.js, what I want you to do is I want you guys to stick with your VS Code and go onto your navigation bar and look for the terminal, the one that says terminal over here, okay? So for mine, it appears up here. I think for Windows, it's just somewhere at the top bar over here. It says terminal as well. So look for that and look for new terminal. And you should see your terminal appearing. So mine, it appears on the right. So for you guys, you should, I don't know, sometimes it appears on the bottom, right? I think the default option is at the bottom. I changed mine quite a while ago. Okay, so this panel is your terminal, right? So what is the terminal? Terminal is basically the way how you will interact with your computer, especially when you're running applications that doesn't have a GUI, a graphical user interface. Usually you can access them via terminal. So for example, over here, we're dealing with our backend application. You will have to use the terminal to do this, okay? So if you install your Node.js properly and all that, what you can do here is we're going to use Node.js to run our app.js, okay? So what I'm going to do is just type Node, okay, and type app.js, okay, and hit enter. So if you have Node installed properly, if you just type Node and then just type your space and then just type your file name app.js, you have your, it will basically run your file and do whatever this file is supposed to do, okay? And as you can see, if you open up the terminal from your VS Code as well, what it does is that it basically has all these things configured, they navigate to the proper directory and all that. If you're not familiar with directories, don't worry about that. If you use the terminal on the VS Code yourself, everything should be handled for you. Okay, so that's okay. So if you see whatever that I'm just looking at on my screen right now that says "Hello World," that means everything works for you. You managed to install Node.js properly. If it doesn't run here, or there's some other error going on, you probably need to reinstall your Node.js and try again. Okay. I highly recommend you to reinstall after the workshop. Okay, so it's more important to listen into the workshop and see and practice again after when the recording is out. Okay. All right. So now the first thing that we need to do is we basically need to cover a couple of things. Okay. So first of all, if you install Node, right, it comes with npm as well. Okay, npm. So npm is what we use to basically install packages, third-party packages. Because why? There are a lot of problems that we usually need to solve. There are a lot of applications that we need to build using our backend application over here. And usually people have already built those things before. Okay, they have already created all those underlying work for you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time you are set out to solve a very common problem. So with that, npm stands for Node Package Manager. Allows us to access all these libraries that are available online, right? Other people have built for us. So what we can do is, if you have Node working properly, you should have npm, okay? So I want you guys to just type npm. If you see a whole bunch of here telling you how to use npm, that means you have npm, okay? If you have installed Node, npm should come naturally with Node as well, okay? So usually when you're developing a backend application like this using JavaScript, you must first turn the folder into what we call a npm package. Okay, we must turn the folder into an npm package. So the way to do this is just type the command npm init-y. Okay, npm init-y. -y basically says yes to, because npm init is like they will come up with a questionnaire. They'll ask you a couple of questions, but most of the time you just say yes to everything, it should work fine. So that's why this -y is there. It's basically for us to say yes to everything, okay? So if you press enter, if you run this thing, they basically will tell you that they have created a file called package.json. Okay, this is what we usually need for writing our backend application. Okay, so what is this package.json for? What does it mean by us turning this folder into like npm package? Essentially, nothing has happened except there's a new file in the folder. Okay, now this file, this package.json over here is sort of like an identity card of your the application over here, all right? Because this package.json will be the one describing all the details about your project, what's the name, how do you start this application, what kind of like libraries are you installed and all that, okay? So to get started, I want you guys to open up your package.json and pay attention to this section over here that says scripts, okay? Scripts. So what is this for? This is basically like you storing shortcuts, okay? You storing shortcuts so that you don't have to run node app.js again and again. Instead, what we can do here is I want you guys to just change this section over here and write start, okay? Write start. And then change the rest of them here. As you can see, this is just a string. I'm gonna write something over here that says node app.js, okay? So what's essentially happening over here is that I'm abbreviating this chunk of like command node app.js into this command that says start, right? So the package basically now knows that, oh, to start your application, I just write node and then app.js. I'm going to save this application, save this file over here, and come back to my terminal and run npm run start. Okay, npm run start. Enter, and then they should be able to access whatever your start script is doing and execute your file just like that. Okay, so this is your minimal setup. You must have this setup ready for you to code anything with Node. All right. Now to create your server, we have to install a couple of packages. Okay. First of all, we need to install what we call Express. Okay, Express allows us to create servers. Okay, when we write servers, you usually have to install some sort of library, some sort of like framework and all that. And Express is the easiest for us to get to that. So what I want you guys to do is we're going to use the npm and install Express. That's all. Okay, make sure you run this command on your terminal that you just opened up using VS Code over here. Make sure you have that and then press enter. So they'll go online and downloads Express and all that. And then you should be able to see your package.json now shows that your application here has one single dependency, which is Express of a certain version number. Okay, don't worry about a version number. Everything should work fine for you. And then there are a couple more. There's a folder going on here as well. Okay, this is where they actually store their code. Okay, we store your library over here that you just installed. If you look at Express, if I open up this folder, as you can see, there are a lot more folders going on here. But you should be able to find Express. You see here, Express. All right, because Express actually relies on a whole lot of other libraries, okay? Because they too don't want to reinvent the wheel. They would like to rely on some other people's work. So these are all the whatever libraries that they need to work, so that they can work. And then you should also have Express, okay, which is whatever you install. So, but don't worry about the contents of this folder. Usually you will never ever touch this folder, okay? So now what we can do here is I'm going to go away from this file. I don't need this anymore. Let's go back to app.js. All right. Now to create your server, the most simplest server, let me just show you a couple of features on writing JavaScript on Node. Usually after you've installed the library, right, you have to sort of like do this action where you import, okay, import this whatever library that you just installed, okay. I don't know if you did this in Python, but Python has something like this as well. You have a library that you just installed in Python and you want to import this library, okay. So you're doing the same thing over here, but the keyword isn't import, it's not import, right. The way to do this is you have require. Okay, I require this library, and then I write Express. So this particular phrase over here basically says that I need Express. And then what this thing does is that it returns you the item that you require from, okay? When you require Express, you will get a variable. That variable is where you access all the whatever functions, all the variables that you can work with these guys from Express have built for us, okay? So I'm going to save it into a variable. Usually I will save it in the exact same name variable as the library itself, okay? So that it feels exactly the same as me working with the library directly, okay? And then after that, the next step that we need to do is we are going to create app constant app is equals to Express. This is how you create an application, okay? After you've imported Express, there's no application yet. This is you creating the application, okay? And then after that, usually you have to define what happens, how do you write your servers, what happens to all the different paths and all that. This is where you define them. So the first use case is, I want to explain app.get, okay? App.get. So what is this app.get for? So when you're dealing with like networks and then the server sitting waiting for network calls and all that, you have to understand that they are following a certain protocol, okay? Now it's a bit too long for me to explain the whole concept of what this protocol is, but the idea here is that it's called HTTP protocol, HTTP. And then they basically have a format where they follow a couple of keywords, okay? First is get, next is post, next, and then after that there's put, and then there's deletes. Now there are more, okay? There are more methods that's available out there, but for now, for you guys, I think it should be well enough if you just stick with these 4 methods, okay? Get, post, put, and delete. So what happens here is that I'm going to create app.get, app.post, app.put, and the last one, app.delete, okay? How do you use these methods? All these methods, get, post, put, and delete. So usually you will have to, when you want to deal with a database, it's pretty common that you say, hey, I want to interact with this database. What are the common actions that you usually want to do? I want to be able to read. I want to be able to add stuff to it. I want to be able to change stuff, change existing stuff. I want to be able to delete stuff, right? So these are the 4 most common actions, and Express allows you to code these things up pretty easily. So the way this works is that you have to pass in a string, which is the path, okay? What is the path? So let's say if you go to our website over here, you see over here, oh, sorry, website, yeah. s3cocampus.com, okay? So this is the base URL, www.s3cocampus.com. This is the base URL. And if you were to code up for base URL, all you need to do is just write slash, okay? If you were to code up for, let's say over here, I have over here build on, /build on, s3cocampus.com/build on. I will have to come down here and write /build. Okay, so that's how you configure your path over here, so that you basically up to you for you to write however many paths you want, depending on which method. Each combination of the method, whether it's get, post, or put and delete, with the string, with the path over here, is one combination, okay? So if you have slash over here, just for slash, over here you're using slash as well. Oops. Over here you're using slash as well. These two, they are basically 2 different combinations. They're not going to clash against each other, okay? So you can do so safely for all of them. And there are 4 different combinations. So long there's get, and then a single path, and then there's no other single sort of like function that does the same thing. Also get with this slash over here. Okay, so it's up to you for you to configure however complicated you want. your how you say paths over here. Okay. So app.get over here, the next section is you need to pass in a function, just like how you write your add event listener. You will need to pass in a function over here. Okay, you're passing a function, and you're going to get request and respond. Rec and rest over here. Now I can change this variable to request or respond, but it's quite long. Let me just write 3 characters. It's good enough. REQ stands for request. RES stands for respond. So usually this request and response over here, request is where all the information about the request that's coming in is going to be stored. Response contains all the functions, all the methods that allows you to craft your message back to the one who's requesting is located at. Okay, so usually the idea here is you read everything that's available in request, then you craft your response, and then you send it back. Okay, so it's pretty common. It's pretty easy to do here. So the idea here is that, I mean, if you're sending me a request, I don't really care about, for now, let's say if I'm starting this application, I just want to test whether this thing works or not. I probably don't need to care about request for now. Let me just write response, okay? Response. The way to work with this is you can write n, okay? You can write n. N is basically a way for you to just straight up and say, okay, I'm ending this response. And then if you pass me anything inside here, I'll say hello world. I'll send this response back with a string hello world, okay? So with this chunk of code, I basically configure it in such a way that when a request comes in, when there's a get request to this path, I will respond with a single string that says hello world, okay? So let's try to do that. I'm gonna disable this for now. Now the last section that you need to write is app.listen. Listen to a certain what we call a port number. Usually a computer that sits on a network and everything. If you manage to find a computer, you guys should have heard of the idea of IP address, right? IP address basically refers to where the computer is and all that, the location is. But even though after you reach the computer, right, there's an idea of port number as well, okay? Usually there's 65,535, if I'm not wrong, ports on a single machine, okay? So that machine has all these ports. It's like a window of your house. So if you have all windows open, then everyone can come in here and then interact with your computer. And obviously you need to have a certain application sitting at a certain port number, which is the window number, to listen to requests. If there's no sort of like a server or an actual application sitting at that particular port number to listen to requests, nobody is going to come in here. Nobody is going to respond to you, all right? So for example, over here, usually just now, remember when we launched our Go Live thingy, it says 5500. So that was the port number. So in this case, on our backend application, I probably want to avoid 5500 because it's occupied by a live server. And if you are developing 2 applications at the same time, you probably don't want them to clash, okay? So let's try and put maybe 3000. And then after that, I'm going to put an arrow function over here. Put an arrow function, parenthesis, equal, larger than, and curly bracket. All right, over here, I'll write console.log. What is this for? This arrow function, if you pass it to app.listen as a second argument, you'll be able to, when the server starts, they will run this function here. So you can write something like, server is listening at port 3000, right? So that there's a feedback telling you that the server is running, okay? So you need to have at least this kind of structure to have any sort of server. So I'm going to save this file and I'm going to start the server. So just like our application just now, we tried to start using npm run start, which basically runs node app.js. So we're going to stick with that. I'm going to run npm run start as well. So as you can see, now I say server is listening at port 3000. That's good, right? Because that's what we needed. That means the server is currently running. You can see how your terminal is at a state of suspension. It's not exiting or whatever, because that's how server is. If you're used to while loops, right, and then there's concept of infinite loop, that means the loop is just constantly running there. It's something like this as well. The application is at a suspension state where it's listening to requests. Okay, so long when there's a request comes in, and then they will look at the request and reply accordingly. Okay, so if you don't stop the terminal, the server is constantly running. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is we're going to use, let's say your Insomnia. Remember the Insomnia application that you just built, that you just downloaded. Okay, this application over here. So there are many variations of this application. This application is used to work with servers over here, right? Let's say I want to test whether my server have I written my path over here correctly? Does it work as what I imagine, right? So this is the application for you to use to test. Insomnia is one of them, but of course, you guys, if you're used to Postman, you can use Postman as well. There are many other applications. For even on VS Code, there's an extension over here that I just installed called Thunder Client, okay, which can be used as well. But what I don't like about Thunder Client is that it kind of like, hogs your whole VS Code. Let's say if you're, I want to test some API, and then you forgot, what did I write in my code? Yeah, I want to check. You have to go away and then you go and open your code. Okay, so I usually like to keep my VS Code only for code and for the terminal. That's all, and then everything else, when you want to test, please use another application. For example, Insomnia or Postman. Okay. So, for example, over here, if you're on Insomnia, today's workshop, I'm just going to use Insomnia for the rest of the workshops, right? Insomnia, you can use it to basically test your path over here, your API. Okay. What you can do here is I have a lot of projects going on. Okay, but don't worry about this if you don't see anything like this. All you need to do is just click on the create button, create request collection. Okay, not design document, yeah, request collection. Design document is for them to design APIs. So you're going to click on request collection, and then I'll probably call it as, this is maybe like build on 2021 HR. Okay, great. So it's like a folder, okay, if you will, all right? It's like a folder where you can store all the requests that you want to test out against your server, all right? So usually you will click on the plus button over here, and there should be a drop down that tells you whether you can create a new request or a new folder. I'm gonna click on new requests, and I'll call this maybe like localhost 3000. Okay, this is just a name, yeah, doesn't do anything, right? So make sure you can see this drop down over here, and as you can see, there are multiple multicolored methods. As what I've explained just now, there's get, post, put, and delete. Get, post, put, and delete. Now there are other options as well, but they each mean different things. Okay, but for now, for starters, you guys should just stick with get, post, and put, and delete. It should serve most of your code operations. Okay, so we are just going to match with whatever API that we just wrote. We wrote gets. Okay, so I'm just going to come back here, make sure I have get selected. If you select this wrongly, don't worry, you can still change it later. Okay, I'm going to click on create. As you can see, this drop down says gets. This is where you can change it even after you have created them. Don't worry. And this is where you need to write the URL. Okay. Now the URL, the servers is only on your own machine, right? It's not live in the cloud or whatever. It only lives on your machine. So the way to interact with your own machine is to always write localhost : the port number. Okay, localhost points to your own machine, basically like this, localhost : and then certain port number. So for example, we created our server at port 3000. I'm going to stick with 3000. Right, so this is what we need. So I'll come back here, I'm going to write 3000, and then that's it, right? So make sure you match /, that means it's at the base URL. That means you're not going to add anything here. Get, that means it's a get method, and then that's it. That's all you need to match. You need to match two criteria only, right? I'm going to click hit on send. I should be able to receive string. What is that string? Hello world, which is what my rest.n says. Okay, rest.n. Okay, so when data traverses through network, right? Let's say this computer talks to another computer, they need to have a common language. And usually when you try to transmit like very complex data structures, you have your arrays, you have a list, your dictionaries, your objects. Different languages have their own standards of implementing that particular data structure, right? So let's say if you build your application using JavaScript, and then suddenly you have another application that's trying to interact with them in Python, right? So obviously they're not going to be able to understand each other unless they come to an agreement to use a single language. So that single language is what we call JSON, okay? And to create JSONs, luckily for you, you don't have to go in and start typing JSON. Okay, it's not another special language that you need to worry about. You just need to worry about, oh, I need to send JSON now. You have to use a particular method and all that. So what you can do here is instead of sending n over here, you can instead send JSON. Okay, JSON, you can see here, it says send JSON response. So I'm going to send, what is JSON used for? So that you can plug in a certain sort of like objects, arrays, and all that, and they will handle all the formatting for you so that the guy who's receiving this response.json over here will be able to understand, oh, this is a JSON that you're sending me, right? So they will be able to interpret and read from that. So instead of sending a string, now you can send a more complex data structure. Let's say an object of message : hello world. Okay, save. And over here, if I send the request again, oops, sorry. Oh, sorry. After you have changed your code, please restart your server. Okay. All right. So after that, you come back to your code over here and hit on send. Now you should see your Insomnia now renders this response, right, in a very nice looking format instead of just gray all around. Like just now, hello world is just gray. Over here, I can see there's green color for my key value pair, for my key, and the value will be hello world, which is a string. Okay. So JSON over here, this is how you recognize JSON, and you should feel right at home because this looks like your Python object, Python dictionaries and your JavaScript objects. Because of what? You have your curly brackets, and then you have your key value pair. So that's how JSON looks like. It's basically a string that's formatted in a certain way that everyone agrees on so that they can emulate a certain data structure. Okay, and essentially this is just a string, yeah. Other than this, and that, other than a certain flag that says this is JSON, but other than that, it's just a string. Nothing special about this. Okay, so I'm going to do the same for app.post as well. So I'm going to do your arrow function equal larger than curly bracket, and then I'm going to send rest.json message hello from post, same thing. Okay, so we're going to test this particular path again. So this is get. I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to create a new one, okay? Because usually after I dealt with one single path, I will leave that particular request only for this particular API. Now I'm going to move on to create another one, okay? Duplicate. I'll call this the same name, don't worry, because the one that makes it different is probably this method over here. So I'll click on post. You can see now they are both different. One is get, one is post, okay? Even though they both have the same name. So post is another method that you're going to sort of like comply to this particular endpoint with this API over here. It's called post, all right? So what's special about post? Get allows you to just send a request and then they come back with a message, right? But post is a special request that does a little bit more than get, because post allows us to now send payloads, okay? Usually when you're sending requests, I want to read your database, we should use get, okay? I'm going to read the database. And that operation is pretty common. You're going to read database, and then I say, I want to read this HR table, and then you reply to me with all the employee data from this table. And what about when you want to create entries? Let's say I want to create this new employee, okay? If I want to create a new employee, you probably have to provide me with a lot of information, like the employee's name, the employee's address, employee's age, and all that. You have to provide me all those information. And if the only way for you to send me all those complex information is through JSON as well, okay? So the way to do this is you have to turn it into post, because you cannot put payloads on gets. You must put payloads on any other methods other than gets. And obviously when you're creating new employees, let's say we're creating new entries on a database, post makes the most sense, because post basically implies that you're trying to create new ones. Why don't you use put? Put implies that the data exists on the database. You're trying to change it to an update, all right? You're trying to update it. What about delete? That means obviously you're going to delete. You're not going to create a new one. You're going to delete them. Okay. Now, all these post, put, and delete, they don't actually sort of like restrict you in such a way that, oh, if you use post, that means you cannot delete things inside here. It doesn't matter. Whatever you do inside your post function over here, it's up to you. But obviously, you try to play nice with the guy who's coding up the front end. Don't make them confused. Oh, I'm using post. You should kind of understand that I'm trying to create new entries in the database, something like that. Okay. So post over here is, again, you're just going to pair the method post, and the API, the path over here. Here says slash. That means you're not going to change the base URL. You're going to stick to this. And then I'm going to hit send. Okay. No payload as of yet, but don't worry. Post allows you to put payload, but it doesn't enforce you. Okay. I'm going to hit send. Oh, sorry. I probably have to restart server. It's send. Rest is not defined. Oh, sorry, forgot to write request and response. Yep. You start your server, hit send again. Yeah. All right. So you have your hello from post, which is what you wrote over here, response.json. Okay. So that's your post. You have get, you have post, and how do I send this actual payload, right? We've been talking about payloads all the time. To send payload on your Insomnia, what you can do is you're going to click on this body dropdown, and there should be a couple of options for you to send payloads. Given the history of the web, there are a lot of people coming up with like their own methods of like, oh, my payload is formatted this way, my payload is formatted that way. So given the history of the web, there are multiple different formats that allows you to attach payloads. But JSON is the most popular one as of yet. Okay, because why? If you're used to JavaScript, you're going to be right at home, because you're going to see the exact same format. Okay, nothing special going on here. So if you click on this section over here that says JSON, and then you are given this sort of like field for you to enter what payload are you going to send. So let's say I'm going to send a payload like this, curly bracket. All right, JSON looks like this. You either start with curly bracket or you start with a square bracket. Okay, square bracket indicates that you're trying to write an array. Square bracket, curly bracket indicates that you're trying to create an object. So over here, I'm going to attach a very simple payload. So let's say I'm going to write name, okay, colon, Eric. Okay, notice how I must write my keys with strings. Okay, it's like compared to JavaScript, you can write your keys using just like that, right? But in JSON, you must write them in strings. Okay, so that's the only thing you need to be aware of. Okay, then now I'm going to send this thing, right? So even with the payload, after I send all these things, it still replies to me hello from post, right? So what is going on here? Because you haven't configured your Express app to be able to read payloads, okay? And in order to do so, you have to basically set what we call middlewares, okay? Don't worry about how middlewares work. The idea here is that you need to turn on a certain setting so that you can read payloads, okay? The easiest way to do this is we are going to go to this line after we created app, before all these sections, okay, before all this, make sure you write app.use express.json. Okay, so this is basically like a toggle. It turns on the ability for Express app to be able to turn, be able to like read your payloads and then store it properly in your request object. Okay, so I'll show you how to access that. So with this turned on, what I can do here is I can maybe console.log certain things. Okay, what is that? Request.body. After you turn on this particular middleware over here, right? This is like setting that you just turn on. You can now do request.body. Okay, request.body basically will now store the payload that you just sent in this request.body. So I'm just going to console.log and see what's happening here. I'm probably have to save and then restart my server. Come back here and then hit send. Now look at this on my console.log. You can see there's now an object of name array, okay? And not just that, you look at the difference between the payload that you just sent and the actual object that the server received. You can see that I'm sending a JSON string, which looks like this, right? I have double quotation mark on my name and everything, but it got formatted properly, and this is an actual JavaScript object. Okay, I can do things like request.body.name, right? Because it's what? It's an object with a key name, so I can directly access name. Save this thing. I come back and reset my server. Hit send again. You can see how I can access the string array. Okay, so that's how you send payloads from this side to your server. Okay, your server will be able to access them through request.body. So you can imagine this is how you interact with from the front-end application. You have your front-end application that manages to grab all the inputs and then form them into a huge object. And I want to send this huge object to the server, right? The method for you to send, I will explore in next workshop, but I'll try. But the idea is that you have a huge object that you want to send across. After you send across, your server needs to be configured to accept the payload. And this is how you accept the payload, right? Okay. All right. So I'm just going to write a couple more over here. Let me just change this to response.json. Instead of just message hello world, I'll probably write type. Put an extra string over here that says this is a post, okay, so that you recognize what is this, okay? And then after that, I'm going to dismantle request.body, okay? So recognize the triple dot sign over here. This is us sort of like doing this grep operator on request.body. Request.body was an object. I'm spreading it so that it now stays in this full object over here. So what this thing does is, if I save this application, rerun this, what I'll get is, I'll get type, post, and the keys and all the individual items inside the payload that I just sent. Okay, I will get that. So even if I come down here and write like age, I write 31, okay, if I send this, you can see how it basically gets appended to this thing as I expand on this, all right? Okay, so I'll stick with this, and then I'll try to do that for app.put, app.delete. Essentially, app.put, app.delete does exactly the same. So technically, there are two distinct types of methods. One is get, one is post. Put and delete is basically just subsets of post. They all do the same thing, but with different names. So technically, there are just two different types, two distinct types, get and post. All right. You could get away from like not using put and delete, but obviously you are now off with lesser options to configure your path. Okay, you have lesser combinations. Okay, so I'll complete this section over here. Request, response. We have the response.json. Type. This is put. Body. And then I'll do the same for delete as well. deletes. Okay, that's it. So technically, you now have all four ports over here, all four APIs, okay, ready to listen to your request, depending on the method and obviously the path. Okay. So restart the server. Let me create those endpoints to test out. Where is it? Here. So I'll just keep duplicating this. Duplicate, create. This should be puts. I'll secret this, and now I'll duplicate this again. This should be deletes. All right. So just to test things out, send this thing again, delete path works, and then send this thing, put, right? Right. So this application is technically ready for us to sort of like configure more in the future. Right. Now there's one more thing that I need you guys to do, right? So obviously this workshop, today's workshop basically ends with us deploying this backend application onto a service called Elastic Beanstalk. All right. So what is this Elastic Beanstalk? Elastic Beanstalk. Okay. So Elastic Beanstalk is like a service, it's like an orchestration service. Okay. Like what? So technically, who is hosting the application that we're going to upload later? Not Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk is a service that manages a whole bunch of little computers called EC2, right? And their job is basically to manage those EC2 computers for you, okay? So Elastic Beanstalk is not the one handling the application. It's not the one hosting the application per se. It is managing a whole bunch of little computers for them to host the application for you. Why is this required? Because sometimes when you build an application, you know how when you build an application, like let's say Flappy Bird, right? I don't know if you guys still remember the word Flappy Bird. There's this game from long ago that just got very, very popular. So let's say you build this game for like, after I spend 1 week building this game and then I upload it to certain app store or whatever, and then people start playing. First, I have 10 users, right? 10 users, my server is fine, right? I can handle the load of 10 servers. But then suddenly it got popular, right? Suddenly like people posting things about it, right? Everyone started going crazy about the game. Then the next week you have 10,000 users, and then slowly you have 100,000, and it just basically ramps up for them. Right. So with that, you basically notice that your little computers can't handle the load anymore, right? If you have one single computer handling all the server load for you for the application, first you can have 10 users, it's fine. 100 users, it starts to like buckle, and then 10,000 users, everything just goes to hell, right? Some users can't access the game anymore, and then everyone just goes unhappy, and obviously you as the app developer would be like, oh no, I'm at the peak of my fame, right? I should not have this kind of problem bogging my app. So Elastic Beanstalk steps in, right, and handles all those things for you, all right? So usually when you have like, sudden spikes of demand like this, they will handle all the part where they create more instances for you, more EC2 computers for you, and then your app feels like it's still fine, right? You can still work with many users, even though you only configure it for one, right? It's not Elastic Beanstalk is for that. So let's look at that, and I'm going to go into your AWS Educate again. Go on to your management console. Yeah, right. So we're done with this static website hosting. So we're not going to look at this for now. Maybe tomorrow we'll touch onto what we can do more with this. Now I'm going to go into AWS over here. Click on the button over here, or you can just click on the search bar here. Okay, it works just the same. So what we're going to do here is we're going to navigate to a service called Elastic Beanstalk, right? Elastic Beanstalk. So we're going to click on this. All right. And you should be able to see this screen. All right. So you don't have any application going on, but that's fine. We're going to create one for now. Okay. As you can see, they even show you all the supported platforms. You can do Java, Net, PHP, Ruby, Go, Python, Node.js, which is what we did just now. Docker and all that. Okay, so don't worry about this. Now I'm going to click on create application. We're going to upload our application that we just did just now, right? So create application, and then you should fill in a form. Now, before you fill in anything here, I want you guys to come back to your code. Sorry, forgot this one section. Remember the port 3000 over here. This is what we define on the computer, okay? I say this computer, please run it on port 3000. But the problem here is when you deploy it to Elastic Beanstalk, you're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to control this. You let Elastic Beanstalk do the configuration for you. So that's why, in order for this application to still work, even though you're developing locally, even though you're deploying it or anything, if you want that to still work, you must configure it this way. Constant port is equals to, first, you need to read what Elastic Beanstalk has given the port number to you, okay? You need to check if that is present or not. So the way to do that is process.env.capital letter ports, okay? That allows us to read from this particular value. And obviously, if you're running it locally, you don't see this value, but that's fine because we can write double pipe and write 3000. So what this basically says is that, oh, I'm trying to run this at this particular port number, and if this doesn't exist, I will use this 3000. Okay, so over here, I'm not going to write 3000. I'm going to use port instead. Okay, that's just one configuration that you need to do. And then this server is listening at port 3000. I think this doesn't matter, right? It's fine. Okay, so do one last check. You must have this particular line that says port is equals to process.env.capital letter ports, right? And then pipe 3000, and then you put that variable here, and then your file must be named as app.js. It must be named as app.js. Package.json, you must have start node app.js. Okay, you must have these three criteria. You must have a script start node app.js, file name called app.js, and this line that detects the port number. Okay, save this, and then now we are going to do this thing where I want you guys to open your folder now. Okay, open it in Finder. Either use a file explorer or you use your Finder if you're on Mac. Click on this, and you should see your folder here. Now, the next thing that you need to do is I need you guys to click into the folder. You must go into your folder, right? You must go into this folder. And you should, once you see your individual files, your app.js, node modules, package.json, all that, this is where you should land, right? And I want you guys to select everything, okay? Command A or Control A on Windows. Right click, and there should be an option that says compress for Mac. If you're on Windows, I think you have to look for something that says send to or share, and then there should be like a zip folder compress or something like that, right? So there should be an option that looks like that. So the idea here is that you need to they will generate a new file for you. Mine says archive.zip, okay? On Windows, I think they will let you rename the file, okay? The idea here is that you need to have a zip file. So what is this zip file? They basically zipped all of these individual files into a single file so that you can upload it as a single file, right? So that's fine. I'm going to go back to my form over here, and I'm going to continue filling in my form. So over here, I'll probably say my build on ASEAN 2021 HR app. Okay. Now this doesn't have to be unique, okay, because it's linked to your account ID and all that. So don't worry about this being having to make it unique enough or anything. Don't worry about that. Applications tags are not important. You can leave it blank. Platform. Over here, this is where you choose the language that you're building this application on. Okay. So you have all these languages, but obviously the one that's related to us is Node.js. So click on that. And you can choose version number here, but usually, since you remember you install your Node.js over here, 14.17. So usually this is the version number that they stick with as well, the latest stable version. Okay, so you don't have to change this as well. And coming down here, application code, and this is where you need to choose whether you want to upload your code or you want to let them upload their own sample code. Okay, so obviously we already gone through the trouble of building our own. So let's click on upload our code, and we're going to click on local file here. Okay, make sure it's local file, not public S3 URL. Okay, now I'm going to click on choose file where they'll ask you to upload your file. So navigate to your folder. Mine was HRF, archive.zip. Click on upload. All right. How big was this file? Okay. So it's uploaded. Now what we can do here is I'm going to click on create application. Okay. So this will take a while, right? So this will really take a while. So the way I did it is I already have create environment. I already have an application running, but it's on a different account. Let me go to that. I'll show you a sample that I have. Build on them sample. Sample gets. It's not loading. Let's go back to our classroom. Console. Okay, plastic bin stock. Okay. Yeah, we can wait for like a good 2 more minutes because this will take a while for them to launch up these resources. Okay, but other than that, once this thing is done, they will basically show up with a link, and that's where you would use that link instead of your your localhost 3000. So it will be a very long link, all with the name of your what's it called, your beanstalk ID and all that. All right. So you'll be using that here instead of this link over here, this localhost 3000. So that link will be available globally. So you can access that link no matter which application you use. All right. So for starters, you always configure your application on your what's called open. Here's my folder. This one. Yeah, this front end over here, your HTML. You can always use this HTML and communicate using your JavaScript with the URL over here, which I'll show you guys in the next workshop tomorrow. Okay, yeah, so that's done, right? So you can click on this link over here. I'll just copy this link and then come back to your Insomnia and try to hit this API over here. So we have all this localhost 3000. What I can do is probably duplicate one of this, duplicates. I'll call this production. It's live now, right? Production. So production, change this link. Oops, where's this link? Copy link. Come back to here, paste, send. All right, you have your message hello world. So that was your application. Okay, so if you were to try to for like post and put and delete, you can do so as well. Let me try to duplicate this for production and change. Yeah, I have a payload here, but obviously the link needs to change to my. Is it this one? Yeah, this one. Okay, and I'm going to hit send payload. Right. So it works just exactly as how it was working on our local development. Okay, but now this API is live. Right. Everyone can come in here and use my link over here and access my API that I just built. Right. Okay, with that, I'll end today's workshop, and then tomorrow we'll continue with the next topic where we actually deal with databases and try to connect our server over here with databases. Okay, with that, I'll pass the time back